So it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and I'd like you to meet my vlog squads. Where are they? Hey, vlog squads! We're all taking vlogs right now. So where are we? Where are we? Hong Kong! So what are we going to do in Hong Kong for this weekend? We're going to stalk Rizal. Stalk Rizal? Are you ready to stalk Rizal, guys? We're going to show you everything that happened to Rizal in Hong Kong in this video. Okay?
As a 27-year-old physician, Jose Rizal was forced to leave his home country for a second time because he was hounded by powerful enemies. He boarded the Melbourne, which brought him to Hong Kong on November 19, 1891. While passing through the Red Sea, Rizal met an English married couple resident at Sandakan, then capital of North Borneo. He learned from them that there is one part of Borneo inhabited by Englishmen, which is independent of England. The husband, William Pryor, was one of the pioneers of North Borneo and the founder of Sandakan, and its first resident as well. Rizal expressed his interest in attracting immigrant labor to North Borneo, which was severely underpopulated at the time. He suggested the bold idea of moving dispossessed families of Galamba to a new life in North Borneo, where they would be free from Spanish and church tyranny. He believed that North Borneo could become a refuge to Filipinos from any part of the Philippines. Thus, Rizal and Pryor had a deal in which Rizal would arrange for a fair-sized contingent of Filipino agriculturists to move to North Borneo, if the conditions are favorable for them there. Upon arrival in Hong Kong, Rizal established himself a house which Basa owned between Remedies Terrace and Kane Road. He began practicing general medicine and ophthalmic surgery, in which he quickly acquired a local reputation as a Spanish doctor. Within a few days of his arrival and without prior warning, his father, Pashano, and his brother-in-law Sylvester Abado arrived in Hong Kong. They escaped deportation to the Sulu Islands by Spanish authorities. They made contact with home and was devastated to discover that Theodora Alonso had been arrested again. An absurd charge was brought against her that she had declared her name improperly, calling herself Alonso, which she should have called herself Leonida de Rizal. Now aged 64 and almost completely blind, she was forced to walk the whole way to Santa Cruz to be imprisoned. However, arriving in a horrid state, the civil governor ordered her immediate release and permitted her to leave the country. Thereafter, accompanied by her daughters Lucia, Josefana, and Trinidad, Alonso reached Hong Kong. Rizal family settled down in Red Nazela Terrace, an area occupied mainly by Portuguese families. At the time, Rizal was pursuing the Borneo project and drew up a proposed contract between the Filipino colony and the British North Borneo Company. Concurrently, he was planning to start in the Philippines a nationwide society called the La Liga Filipina. Rizal desired the La Liga to be a means of organizing the intellectuals and other elements of the country into a cohesive organism that would strengthen and make real and effective the ideals cherished by those thirsting for liberty. But, in reality, both schemes, the Borneo colony and the La Liga Filipina, in the form he designed them in, were impossible to achieve. The first asked Britain and the chartered company to sign a contract. The second asked Spain to turn a blind eye to the fact that the La Liga Filipina would be a government within a government. No government in its right senses would consider this. It can only be concluded that at the time Rizal had lost his sense of judgment. Rizal believed that he stood very close to death, and it may be partly this that was affecting his judgment. He only wanted to return back to the Philippines. During this time, General Eulogio Despojol began his governorship in the Philippines. On December 23, 1891, Rizal wrote to him, "I have done all I ought, without ceasing to love my country's good, to preserve her for Spain by means of a solid policy, cased on justice and community of interest." The letter received no reply, for it tested Spain too far. Finally, during these months, Rizal came to grips with the practical details of revolution. He was aware of the responsibility involved in projecting a revolution, of the thoroughness of planning required, of the need of absolute certainty of success. He knew that the Philippines was not prepared, for the country lacked weapons and manpower. His idea was that peaceful methods should be employed, first the La Liga Filipina, but if this fails, he will counsel and plan for revolution. Rizal's letters to Boumediene show that he had abandoned even as a hope of assimilation, and his aim was now the liberation of his country from Spain. Rizal's apparent contradictions during this time in Hong Kong shows the state of uncertainty he was in. His aims and activities at the moment contradictory, and none of them enjoying his entire faith. Only appear consistent with two things are placed side by side: the phrase "Colot Perti Jupiter, Rios de Mentat," and his pen name Laong Laan. However, beneath apparent external contradictions lies his second consistence, which once determined his course. He never changed it. On March 21st, prior to leaving for Sandakan, he addressed a second letter to General Despojol, explaining his intention to form a Filipino colony in North Borneo. To the Spanish, the Borneo project had to be prevented at all costs, and to make sure of this, for the first time, it became Spain's interest to persuade Rizal to come back to the islands. Rizal sailed in the Menmon to visit Sandakan. He found that the acquisition of land for development purposes was governed by definite rules and were applied unexceptionally. His plan to find a colony within a colony would have to be abandoned. Regardless of this, Rizal visited many possible development sites and observed the problems of jungle clearance and human settlement. He was to obtain written assurances from the government that there were no inequalities. William Pryor, surprised by this insistence on such freedoms, framed a written request for assurance. Since acting governor L.P. Beaufort was on tour, the acting government secretary Alexander Cook received a letter. To Rizal's astonishment, Cook made him an outright offer of maximum 5,000 acres free of rent for 3 years. Upon his return to Hong Kong, Rizal was invited for an interview with the Spanish consul. The Governor-General, he was told, had directed the consul to inform him that he did not approve of the Borneo project. With ample land available in the Philippines and insufficient men to tilt it, it was unpatriotic, in Despojol's view, to lure men away to work in another country. Despojol persuaded Rizal to return. Torn between the impulsion to return and the warnings of reason to stay where he was, Rizal decided to go back to Manila. His family was opposed to the decision. His brother-in-law wrote, "I think that from there you can do all you wish without coming here for the good of the Philippines." In addition, the La Solidaridad wanted Rizal to set up a new newspaper in Hong Kong with a more radical policy. The last thing they wished was to see him risk his life by returning. In April 1892, Rizal received a letter from Pryor stating that the governor refused to confirm Cook's action in offering you the 5,000 acres of land free, so you will not be able to have it. When he received the letter, it was clear to Rizal that the incident hardened his decision to ignore the warnings of his friends and family and caused him to feel that there was no real alternative than to return to his country. He said nothing to anyone about giving up the Borneo project. He would go over to Manila for a few days and sell off some of the family's properties before settling in Borneo. Rizal knew, however, that it would almost certainly mean death. He knew that they would never allow him to escape again. He delayed his departure in order to celebrate his 31st birthday with his family. The day after, he privately made his preparations for death. He had considered it in every detail, for he must die well. He must die with his face and chest to the sky. It was, with his knowledge of anatomy and his swordsman's acute sense of balance, he knew there was a way of standing in which, if he was shot in the back, for his body to swing around at the instant of death and fall on his back. He now wrote 2 letters to be opened after his death. The first was to his friends and family, and second to the Filipino people. The step that I have taken is without doubt very hazardous. I cannot live knowing that many are suffering unjust persecutions on my account. I cannot live seeing my brother, my sisters, and their numerous families persecuted like criminals. The 2 letters handed to Dr. Marquez were preserved and published later after his death. Rizal wrote to Despojol saying that he was coming to Manila and that he wished to take upon himself the burden of persecution his family had been suffering on his account. Accompanied by her sister Lucia, He embarked for Manila. When the Spanish consul was informed that the ship had sailed, he called to the Governor General, "The rat is in the trap."